Hey, welcome to the first podcast of 2026 of Bracketville. I'm Tim Kruger and the master of Bracketville, the inventor of Bracketville, Dave Ullman with me. Dave, how are you today?
I am doing well, Tim. How about
Is it
yourself?
cold down there in your part of the country too?
It's been very chilly today
Yeah,
and the
it's
wind has
chilly here
been
too.
blowing. I won't call us the frozen tundra, but
Yeah.
we're
My wife is free. It freezes when it gets below 50 and she's got to go to Minneapolis tomorrow. So I'm like, honey, you better bundle up. All right. So here's what we're going to do today. We had planned to do a lot of these, but we thought we'd wait till we got more data and things made more sense of one another and so on and so forth. And we thought this is a perfect start. I know it kind of there's a trigger that I'll talk about in a little bit. For me, MLK Day is when I do something a little different on my bracket. So we just thought this was a great time. A couple days where there hadn't been any high leverage matchups to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop up here in a second. We're going to pop up a screen and it's a spreadsheet, and you'll see where Dave and I have our seed lists and they're side by side, and we're just going to go down through them and get a consensus. I think I went through I think we both end up at 45 where it cuts off until we get into the automatic qualifying, mid-major, whatever you want to call them. I think there was only probably 10 or 12 where we lined up together, which is the way it is and should be, frankly. So we thought we'd do that. And if you want to follow along with this on your phone or side by side on your computer while you're watching this and have Warren Nolan up, it'll be helpful to you to kind of see what we're looking at. We're just going to look at it on alternate tabs and so forth and not put Warren Nolan up simply because of the way Warren Nolan feeds into your computer, and there's a lot of ads, and it sometimes gets very hard to read. So, without further ado, we'll get started. This is something that Dave and I both really love doing. This is like the fun stuff. And by the way, so if you've watched some of our mock selections of path, we're not going to go through. We're going to follow the principles and procedures of the NCAA selection committee, but we're not going to go through and vote on everything. I mean, that's silly with two people. So we're just going to pop up the sheet, and I'll show you what we're looking at here. And okay, so on the way on the left column, that's kind of how our consensus bracket, consensus seed list is going to look. And you can see over on the right side, you got my seed list, you got Dave's seed list, and we're just going to go down through them when we come to some discrepancies, and then we're going to put them in the center there where you see teams considering, and that's where we're going to that's where we'll put them, and then we'll go from there. All right. So I've come up with here we are. All right, I've come up with the first six: Arizona, Duke, UConn, Michigan, Purdue, Nebraska. I think there may be one or two differences in there, but most people have right now after the weekend have those six. I do want to mention one thing because I know Dave's gone back and forth, and so have I. Duke and UConn are extremely close. Do you feel that way, Dave?
I do. Yeah, I mean that's been one I've had UConn number 2 for the last couple of weeks, but I think recent play by the two different teams has elevated Duke now in a position slightly above them. And it's interesting that you ended up kind of with the same conclusion heading into our brackets on Tuesday. I just think that how Duke has performed in the last couple of games compared to Connecticut with close calls against Seton Hall and Georgetown, that's hurt UConn's net and some of their predictives a little bit as well because it's more of a numbers game and how you play as opposed to results. So I think that for me edged Duke ahead, which in the vernacular in the middle of January doesn't really mean a whole lot, but down the road it could be really big for one of them because unless one of them slips and they both end up, in the same in the East region as either a 1-2 or a 2-3 or a 1-3 or something like that, having that number 1 in the East being Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
is a much closer proximity in the regional round. So, I think that's both something they would covet if they were gonna be a 1 seed, so that race is gonna be, very closely watched between now and Selection Sunday.
Yeah, that's the one thing I look at too is, we've got Houston, we have, help me out here, DC, got San Jose, and we have Chicago.
And yes.
Usually they have one, they'll have one, say, Philadelphia, and then they'll have Miami or Tampa or Atlanta. So it is a little bit different that they don't really, they pretty much slice the the country, and we have three sites that are more Midwest and West where a lot of times the teams are in the East. However, I'll say this over the last bracket, and you know this better than anybody, Dave, that the ACC have had minimal teams the last couple of years, so then it became like almost teams fit more into their geographical region. So I don't know if that's what they were going for or what, but it's the way it worked out. They have these years in advance, so it's not like anything they're trying to fix up. But at any rate, yeah, and you mentioned a good point. So should mention like so for the people that haven't gone to Bracketville and are watching this, make sure you do go to bracketville.com, be a subscriber because that you get special subscriber content, and plus you'll know when everything is going on. You'll get notifications. And so on Mondays, we release the BV rankings. Okay. And I'm gonna just talk about that a second because if you aren't familiar with it, you won't understand it. So BV ranking is something Dave and I we started with more of a results based thing last year, but this year, after last year's selection committee, we kind of took a look at what did the selection committee value, and we really researched it. We looked at some outside research some people had done, and what we came up with was SOR, strength of record, ESPN's metric, the new one that just started last year, wins above bubble, and then net. Those are the three, if you added them up, averaged them up, nothing is absolute, but certainly for most of the bracket, that's what it seemed to boil down to. So we took those three and we averaged them out every week. We take them, average them out, come up with a ranking of all the teams. And as the season's gone along, this is the first year we're using that metric. We've kind of found that it's starting to kind of fall into place, really. So it's very interesting. So anyway, that comes out on Mondays, and then Tuesday and Friday the rest of the year until we get to championship week where we'll update our brackets. Well, wait, are we doing it before, after President's Day, or how are we doing that?
Yeah, usually, once we hit March, sometimes we go to 3 days a week, and then
Yeah,
championship week's kind of
every day.
maybe not every day, but,
Yeah.
when you have some results that matter, yes.
Okay, so that's what you can look forward to. So your big days are Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. Generally, we have them up by lunchtime every on all those days. So anyway, so now when you hear us talk BB rankings, you'll know what we're talking about. So let's forge ahead here. And so, like I said, we've got those six right now. Pretty solid. I mean, I think we're all kind of waiting for Nebraska to play Purdue and go on some tough road games. They've already conquered Illinois on the road. So we're kind of waiting for that. And then maybe they play I think they have a rematch against Michigan State, if I'm not I could be incorrect.
They play Illinois again. I think Michigan State, they only play
Oh, they play
once.
Illinois. That's who it is. Okay. So yeah, Illinois again. That'll be interesting. So at any rate, um, so right now we've got Arizona just sitting there on top until they get knocked off, and we'll get to a team that was in that top five pretty much solidly through the whole season until this last bracket. Okay, so now let's go to Gonzaga and Houston. This is somewhere where Dave has had Houston above Gonzaga here recently. I haven't. I've got them much closer now than they were. So I will let you start off with why you think Houston deserves to be over Gonzaga.
Well, it's been a very close call, and for a period of time, Gonzaga was ahead of Houston, and I think very much deservedly so. And you could certainly make the case that they still should be, and it's not a this is not one of those right or wrong answers or something like that. If you're projecting out, I think there's a realistic potential for Gonzaga to end up with 31, 32 wins, sweep the West Coast Conference in its final season, and go into the tournament with, one or two losses, in which case it's very likely that they could end up even on the one line when all is said and done if that kind of scenario unfolds. The difference is for me, really, and why a couple of weeks ago I edged Houston slightly ahead was that Houston finally started adding a couple of, you know, what I would call NCAA level quality wins. The Arkansas win looks better than it did when they beat them. They beat Texas Tech, and granted, that was at home, which is very hard to beat Houston at home. They also have a win over Auburn. And I think just their metrics, their predictive metrics have been really strong, and their results metrics are finally now in the top 8 with both of them, in that top 10. So that pushed them up for me. And then, the other thing, fair or unfair, um, you know, the Kentucky and UCLA wins that Gonzaga had simply have not held up as well. Now Kentucky's starting to has played a little bit better last week, won a couple of games. UCLA would not be in my projected field right now, which would give Gonzaga basically only 2 wins over projected tournament teams where Houston would have more. And then fair or unfair, because Michigan literally blitzed everybody in Las Vegas, so that was a week that I'm not sure any team has ever had or ever a team may have again.
Right.
But it's hard to overlook a 40-point loss
Yeah.
when I'm looking at teams side by side. Um, and Houston's moved ahead in the Q1 category as well, and some of that's just by default. They're going to end up with a lot more because of the Big
Sure.
12. So that it's a close call. I think Houston's overall profile right now is slightly better. And the other thing I would think, if you're asking me to take them on a neutral court, I would take Houston to win.
I would not disagree with that. Well, I don't know. I guess it would be a real coin flip for me, but yeah, I hear you. Those are all great points. Kind of all I agree with when I was looking at the alternative to this. Um, I do think Alabama, with the schedule they play, the number one schedule in the country, that's a nice win on a neutral 4 by 10. I was at that game and I was kind of actually surprised with the ease of Gonzaga won that game. Let's put it that way. Um, but you're right, 2 teams in the field, but they also have games where they've beaten 3 teams that are on the bubble still, UCLA, Santa Clara, and Creighton, and Oklahoma, actually 4 teams. So, give them credit for at least going out in the non-conference and playing a decent schedule, which has sometimes been hard for them to do unless they play the upper tier. Um, yeah, the metrics I think are pretty even. But you're right. It's I don't know if it's past bias that I'm still hanging on to the Gonzaga over them. For our the good thing is we're debating over a 7-8 here, okay? Um, the realization is that depending on how this folds out, I would think Purdue would go to maybe St. Louis. Nebraska would go to either St. Louis or Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
And
I think probably Nebraska would go Oklahoma City, but I'd have to double
it's
check my
close
math
because I
on
know
that. And
it's
then Houston would also go to Oklahoma City. So, and Gonzaga would be in Portland. So you're not fighting over a pod
right.
here.
I'm just talking about, and then as we move forward into the regions, um, Gonzaga would probably end up in the West anyway, depending on how this rolled out. But you do have 2 Midwest teams there, so but they're all the sites are, all the so talk about Washington, D.C., and then you've got obviously one of them would take Chicago, That would probably be Purdue. And again, Purdue can't play Arizona in the first round because they can't have a 1-5. But Arizona's going to
Right.
be in the West anyway. So Purdue would probably be Midwest. Nebraska then would probably go south, I would guess, to Houston.
Yeah, the way I am gonna end up tomorrow is, because Nebraska can't be because see, the way I have mine, Michigan would be in the top of the South, so that eliminates Nebraska from going there, so Nebraska ends up going east,
Ah, okay.
and then
Yeah.
Gonzaga I mean, they either have to go east or west, Nebraska would,
And Washington, D.C. is
and,
closer.
I think it would makes more sense I did the mileage on it, Nebraska going to Washington, DC is still closer than Nebraska going to San Jose, and then you leave Gonzaga in the West.
Yeah. So then you would have Houston open to pair
In
up
the
with
South, which
Michigan.
they can go to now
Yes.
because of the change up, yes.
Oh, and they're allowed to play in Houston because they're not
Yes,
playing in their home
because
arena.
they're not the host anymore.
Right. Smart move on their part. So then, yeah, then Gonzaga would be 8 and they would head west, and that's where they want to be anyway. So it would all work out for everyone. So I will stop this for a second and move on and update this. And so now I think we have Michigan State both at a 9, so we'll keep them there. But then we have quite the quandary of teams that we kind of up and down here. So we have Iowa State, BYU, Illinois, Texas Tech, and Vanderbilt kind of are the teams that we're going to discuss now for the 10, 11, and 12 slots. So you started off with BYU and Iowa State. Tell me the decision to go BYU over Iowa State and moving Illinois up to the 3 line.
Well, that was just a development for this week. I've had Illinois been one of the top 4 seeds for the last couple of weeks, and quite honestly, Tim, it was a little bit of a default kind of thing, things that happened around them. Their home victory, over Minnesota is not what pushed them into that point. It's a really close call between Iowa State and BYU. When I look at BYU, their 2 losses are 2 points to Connecticut and a really close game until right at the end down in Lubbock against Texas Tech, which is a very hard a place to win, like a lot of the Big 12 road trips are going to be. And then when I went to Iowa State, having lost 2 in a row, I think that the fact that they lost to Cincinnati, which is not a bubble team at this point, playing in the Big 12, could they make a run and get back in the conversation? Yes, that's possible. This is also a Cincinnati team that has a quad 4 loss on their resume. So I think the fact that I saw part of that game, on television and in the second half, Iowa State just never really got it close enough to make it really scary for Cincinnati. And so I think the fact that they added, even though it technically is a quad 1 loss, it's a loss to a 70 net team right now that could rise or it could fall. I think that disparity and then the fact that they, got beat by what, 21 at Kansas. Though the combination of those 2 left me feeling better about where BYU was, and thus they ended up a spot ahead of Iowa State.
Yeah. Um, it's pretty close. I'll say that. Um, I will admit I do have a bias when a team loses to like not play the pole game that a lot of fans play because resumes sometimes will change. I do take into point the Cincinnati loss. It's not, even though it's not a bad loss, it is on Iowa State if you're competing for a top 2 lines, right? So definitely, yeah, I definitely want to move them to 3 here. I don't, I have them 10, you have them 11. I don't, yeah, that's flip of the coin type thing. BYU though, I was a little, I thought they would put up a better fight at Texas Tech. Now Texas Tech's a tough place to play. I get that, and they're a tough team to play. But I thought, I guess technically we don't need to talk about Tech for these next three because neither one of us have them as a three line. So it basically comes down to, I'll agree with Iowa State at a 10, but then it comes down to Vanderbilt, BYU, and Iowa State for that third spot, or the last two spots, I should say, on the three line. I still think Vanderbilt, has a fair amount of meat on the bone here. When we look at their metrics, they've dropped all the way to 13 in the net when they were hovering around 4, 5, 6 all season long. But I mean, they've just lost 2 quad one games. It's not like in the Southeast Conference you're going to have plenty of quad one opportunities. They played a relatively decent non-conference schedule. Where do they sit in the BV this week?
I can get that for you here real quick.
Their average would be about 11 something.
They come in at about 13.
13th. Okay, so that is the number 1 4 seed. Ken Palm has them at 12, so that's the last 3 seed. They've won 9 games in Q1 and 2, which is pretty impressive. Now, they do have 2 games that are, really outliers in that quad 2, a 92 and a 107, which you're almost like, okay, had you played those neutral, one would be a quad 3. I kind of like to look at the opponents and who they've beaten. Obviously Alabama, again, another team that beat Alabama. That's been their best win, but that was at home. They did beat St. Mary's, who we don't really know tons about, really, especially after last weekend in their loss to Santa Clara. They beat Wake Forest, one of those ACC teams that just can't seem to get over the hump when they have a big game. They can't seem to win that game to really push them into the field. They did beat an SMU team at home. The SMU team, I think, is pretty darn good and can cause people some problems. So, yeah, Iowa State. I think we're okay with them. Who am I looking for here? I'm looking for BYU. So BYU, yeah, and again, here's another team that their 2 losses are against the 2 toughest teams they played. One on neutral site. You played UConn to a 2-point game and then lost to Texas Tech. Again, like I said, no shame going to Lubbock and losing to Texas Tech. I just thought maybe they'd put a little more fight in there. They beat 2 ACC teams that are in the field, Clemson and Miami. They beat a Big East team that's in the field, Villanova, and a Wisconsin team that probably when they beat them, they're not the Wisconsin team that we're seeing today. I would think that's probably fair to say.
Yeah. And, that goes on all season. That's one thing that I'm not sure that that you hope anyway the committee parcels some of that out during their, hours and days of debate.
Well, the reason
Because
why
where a team finishes their net rating when you're debating some of this in their ranking in March is not always indicative necessarily one way or the other of the team when they played. Because, let's say some team's rolling along, they get a major injury to a player and their net drops, by 20 some points and they become a bubble team. Well, somebody hopefully is smart enough to realize, well, when they beat them, they were at full strength, and we got to give a little more due credit for that than how it looks, and vice versa. Obviously, Wisconsin is a significant lead. They're playing much better now than they were back in late November and early December.
Yeah, and I think all that does, and the reason I said that was just the margin.
Mhm.
A 30-point margin. I think Wisconsin seemed like they were losing games 20 plus points kind of regularly there for a little while. Yeah, to your point, you could sit there and make an argument for your case with any team or against your team. You know what I mean? Like with any team on this board, really that way. And this is what's so cool about this. All 3 of these teams are discussing. They all lost all of their losses to the top 3 teams they played. Illinois, the top 3 teams Illinois has played, that's who they lost to. The top 2 teams, um, Vanderbilt lost to. So it's kind of interesting in that respect that when they played. Now, I will say this, uh, yeah, they're slightly better on the Illinois slightly better on the numbers than these other 2 on the metrics. If you look at the
That's ultimately what allowed me to bump them up too, is and their BV rating too today, um, suggests that that's where they are. They still have some really Big Ten games coming up that will help solidify whether they're, in a 2-3 seed conversation or whether they're in a 4 or 5 seed conversation or whatever that ends up being. And I think that's important to point out. Where we are now is we're far enough in that we're starting to get an idea of which teams are going to kind of be competing for spots in the top third and the middle third and then the bubble group, but there can still be some movement within those parameters because there's a lot of games and a lot of meaningful results that are still going to get tagged onto people's resumes between now and March.
yeah. So I'm willing to say Iowa State at 10. Illinois, frankly, you have them at 12 though, so I don't want to go any higher than that. But I would argue, I would argue the Texas Tech one as much as I, in my mind, think, gosh, who the hell would want to play this team, right? When you start looking at their numbers a little bit, they don't like for instance, we mentioned Vanderbilt had 9 wins in Q1 and 2. Texas Tech has 6. And frankly, a couple of those are 3 of those are against teams that are 4 teams, frankly, of those wins are against bubblicious teams. LSU, Wake Forest, Colorado, 2 teams that are not in the field. Oklahoma State, another team that's not in the field. So, you've really got the BYU win and Duke just for a while there, they were playing these top teams and not having success. Purdue, Illinois. So I would say, what do you think about this? We go Iowa State 10, Illinois 11, and Vanderbilt 12.
Yeah,
Or do we want to go BYU
well, I would
11
put
and Illinois
BYU over
12?
Vanderbilt myself, but I mean, again, this is Vanderbilt became a very tough um, spot for me, and I think I probably got him a little lower than I intended. But what happened was there was a lot of stuff going on in that middle section because Iowa State lost twice. Um, Texas Tech had a big win over BYU. Florida is starting to play like the Florida we thought we were going to see when a lot of us had them as a potential number 1 seed to start the season. I see that you have them up in the same spot that I do.
Yeah.
And that sort of inherently left Vanderbilt 1 spot behind Florida for me, considering that while head to head rarely matters in the big picture, the fact that those 2 teams I started to compare side by side and the fact that Florida just beat them in their building um, gave them a slight nod. I mean, I know that's a lot of times that never comes into factor, nor should it be a big indicator. But occasionally, when you're talking about teams side by side, um, it does matter. It can. And the other thing for me when it comes down to Vanderbilt, and they're a really good team, and I expect them to be at the top of the SEC. To me, it comes down to St. Mary's, Wake, SMU, LSU, VCU are a pile of their best wins. Yes, they have the Alabama win at home, which is a high quality win. And then I would say, well, Texas Tech beat Duke and BYU. BYU at home, Duke on a neutral court. So that's a trump. And again, we're talking about teams here, Tim, that they're very, very similar. I wouldn't have, I'm not going to, wouldn't sit here and spend a half an hour arguing with somebody if you reordered the 5 of them. But when I'm going through it, if I come down to a differentiator, either on the bubble or at a certain spot, who are your best wins against, assuming you don't have an outlier or really poor loss along the way. And I tend to give the default um, to that in the very slightest of margin. Um, but again, we're doing the proverbial splitting hairs here on a bunch of really good basketball teams.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
how about for the sake of time, we do this? Iowa State 10, BYU 11, Illinois 12. Okay.
okay,
Then we go Vanderbilt 13, Florida 14, Texas Tech 15, since they're both 4 seeds. All right. They're Texas Tech's probably going to send out west anyway. So, um, go that route, and then we will debate the next 5, 15 through 20. How does that sound?
that works for me.
All right.
Yeah,
So we
one of the
will.
hardest decisions I had for myself was the cut between 16 and 17, the last four in the
Oh,
first.
yes. Very. I think I spent well over 45 minutes yesterday just looking at that group of teams in there, and that's a great point. That's what we're gonna hit next.
I mean, really, it came down to 3 teams for 1 spot.
Yeah.
For me, it was, Alabama, Virginia, and Kansas for 16.
Well, yeah, I'll just while I have the sheet up here, I'm just gonna put Alabama in because I have no disagreement with that at all. And we both had Virginia and Kansas, one had Kansas over Virginia, one had Virginia over Kansas. I'm I guess our debate we're a big debate here. It once we got it sorted out, it kind of made sense to us, I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think
So,
Virginia's playing really well. Their predictive metrics, reflect that, being, 14th in the net and, you know, even higher in the T rank score. I just think what you can't get away from, the non-conference, schedule for Virginia versus Alabama was night and day. And I think hopefully the committee, even though we are in a much more metrical and analytical driven world than we used to be, would take into account that yes, Alabama has a couple of more losses, but they played, the difference in strength of schedule is eye popping. And so I think you have to give Alabama some credit for that. And that's how I ended up keeping them on line 16, slightly ahead of Virginia. Um, and then you could debate Virginia and Kansas as well.
but we'll put Virginia 1, Kansas 2. I was very those were very close for me as well. I didn't like that non-conference strength of schedule when you compare it like to Kansas number 2 in the country, but when you look at the metrics that kind of overrides it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um okay, so
Well, and the
we
other thing is, if you look at road record, Kansas right now is just 1-3 on the road, and Virginia is 4-1. So we all know how hard road wins are in the league, in your league. And Virginia, has 3 of them already, winning at Louisville, winning at SMU this past weekend in a hard fought game, and then winning at North Carolina State, which, may or may not end up being a tournament level win or not. But either way, going that's what kind of gave Virginia the edge, just their metrics and then their performance on the road to this point.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to just moved on. So we're going to put Alabama 16, Virginia 17, Kansas 18, Clemson 19. That agreement with you?
Yes, that's works
Okay.
for me.
And I'm trying to see we've got any differences. We end up with Tennessee on the same one. So I'm going to throw,
Now it starts to get even more interesting
yeah,
too.
no kidding. Now we've got I'm going to put a group of 6 teams in here.
A group of well, there's this, oh, there's that. Well, there's
Yeah,
this. There's
exactly. And we will debate these for the next spots. So Arkansas, I think their resume and what they've done so far is fairly impressive. Um,
Yeah, I think the only thing to me outside of the Texas Tech win on a neutral court, for me is they seem to be kind of, again, Arkansas is 1-3 on the road, and that road win is at Old Miss. So their last 2 road trips to Auburn and Georgia did not, go very well. So it's not so much that they lost the game, they were never in the game at Auburn, um, and got behind Georgia and made it interesting a couple of times, but, ended up losing by double digits. So, um, that's sort of that's the caveat to me with Arkansas that's concerning. The challenge is I'm not sure of that other group who I felt comfortable putting above them either.
Okay, we have a little bit of a technical difficulty, but you can still hear me, right, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, so we're just gonna forge ahead. I can't see anything on my end, so I won't be able to put the screen back. What do you have the spreadsheet up on the screen?
No, I just,
Okay, that's all right. We'll forge ahead because I know where we're at. So we've got I put 6 teams up there: Arkansas, St. John's, Kentucky, Central Florida. Who else is in that
probably
grouping?
Louisville in that
Louisville,
mix.
and I think we had
North
one more
Carolina,
in
maybe.
there. North Carolina, correct. So we're down to 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24, and we're going to kind of cut it off at 24 for this episode. We thought we'd do the top 6 lines this time, and maybe in the very, very near future do the 7 through, we'll kind of do a offline consensus, put that up, and then do the bottom where there's even a lot more discussion on 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So
And the 10 and 11s are the ones that have the most movement from week to week too, because you're
oh,
talking about what
absolutely.
teams that are barely in, barely out. One game makes a difference of 6 spots on a seed line right now.
Right, and the other thing is to, just between Dave and my brackets, 2 people who look at it a lot. I mean, I think, Virginia Tech's one, like, I think of that you have them have had them in for 2 brackets in a row. I have them, like, second, 4 out, you know? I mean, they're all over the place because those teams are jumped so close together, and it's all in what you wanna pick, out of those teams, but we will get to that. So, for the 20th spot, the last 5th seed out of that grouping of 6, who do you, feel firmly about?
I'm not sure I feel firmly about any of them, but, I defaulted into Arkansas staying there,
Okay.
simply because of the metrics, and, their win over Texas Tech, who we have as a solid 4 seed. Um, they don't really have anything negative on their resume, but just the road record, and they have a couple of other nice wins, and I just couldn't yet elevate somebody right now over them. And again, let's be honest, Arkansas has been helped recently by some shaky play by Tennessee,
Yeah.
some shaky play by North, or maybe lack of defense from North Carolina, giving up all those points on their West Coast swing and going 0-2
Yep.
against Cal and Stanford. Because Carolina was a 4 seed for me for,
Yeah,
2 or 3 weeks,
I
and
did too.
then, um, you know, and then Louisville has some nice wins, but they just haven't been able to beat the best teams that they played, and, it I'm kinda weighing this, how much Michael Brown gonna be back? When's he gonna be back? How much is that gonna affect the team? But then they go out and they have the night where they hit their shots and they beat Pitt by what, 50 or whatever it was the other night. And, that'll help your
Yeah.
metrics a little
Yeah,
bit.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, no kidding.
So they're kind of in that quagmire. I think St. John's is probably pushing the envelope to get back in that conversation. Um, just they're going to have to beat. They're going to have to keep winning and show well against Connecticut. If you're really going to want to climb, because I'm not sure that it's going to be more of a volume type of quality wins as opposed to elite wins moving out. I will say I've been pretty impressed with Central Florida. On and off through the year. Not that they're great, but they gave Arizona a really good game down there this past weekend. It certainly was not a blowout. Um, and then you've got a team like Kentucky now that's won two miracle games in the last week and have gone from potentially being a bubble team or right on to probably, you know, back, if not in, to close anyway, being in the top half of the bracket again when you win, in those two road games, particularly the comeback at Tennessee the other night. So I don't know. I ended up settling on Arkansas, not because I'm really thinking that that's the best spot for Arkansas, but I'm not sure that other group who I'm going to put there.
Yeah, so I would say because I think we have, don't we have Tennessee? You have Tennessee at 27, correct?
26, but yeah, right in that
26.
ballpark.
Okay. So, so we got Arkansas at 20. So we basically have five more to go here. Um, yeah, and some teams that just, like you said, they may look good one night, they may not look good another night. You look at the metrics one time and their metrics change and they look a little better. And then, as we mentioned, teams like North Carolina kind of zoom past you. Um, or not zoom, drop. So then you can get in there. Um, I think I'm back, Dave, which is exciting to me. All right. I'm not flying blind anymore.
There you go.
It's amazing it kept going. So let me fix this here real quick for you.
Well, I will say, Tim, when we updated the latest BV rankings, the BV ranking came in with Arkansas in the 20th position, which is kind of where we ended up defaulting them to. Um, Followed by Louisville in the 21st position, and St. John's in the 22nd position. So that's kind of by default where I ended up. And so then it kind of comes down to spots 23 and 24.
Yeah.
And I ended up keeping North Carolina in the 23 spot, and then I have UCF at 24.
UCF's interesting to me. Um, Resume
Well,
doesn't have a ton of meat on it.
their quality metrics are better than their predicted.
Very much so. Yeah.
And again, it's a little bit by default because then you get into that group of Kentucky, Tennessee, Villanova, SMU, depending on your feelings on Georgia. Um, I, UCF kind of ended up defaulting in that position, and some of it was just they gave Arizona a really good game, and I'm like, well, they were 25 for me this past weekend, so I'm not going to drop them after losing a close game to Arizona.
Yeah. So to wrap up, what do we got 21 through 24?
I can't see your screen, Tim, but I have Louisville, St. John's, North Carolina, and UCF, but I'm open for debate.
That's very close to where I have them. I think St. John's you hit right on the nose for me. So I think that's probably where we'll settle on that one. The top six. So Louisville, St. John's, North Florida, right? That's correct. You hear
Yes.
me, Dave? Okay.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
So we'll go with that. And I think we'll cut it off right there since we're having some technical difficulties here. You're seeing me in 8 different screens, and it's not good. So, um, all right. So
You're a popular guy, Tim.
that's our top 24. We will post them on Bracketville if you want to see the whole list as well, the top 24. And then again, like we said, the next podcast we will do it offline, have the top 24, and then we'll start with number 25 and go down. And if there's any changes, somebody jump from 28 to 23, we'll talk about that. But then we'll move on down the list. And even an exercise like this, as you see, it takes, an hour. And we don't want you to, spend the whole day listening to this. So you have to get to work. So we really appreciate you joining us. That's our first swing at this. And we will jump into further efforts on those bottom tiers, and by that time, I'm sure it'll all change. All
You
right.
can count on the
Thanks,
bubble
Dave.
bubbling.
Yeah, no kidding. Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate it. Thanks, folks, for listening. It's a brand new channel, so we'd love to get some subscribers going on that. So if you can, hit subscribe, and we'll be back with more product in the very near future. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Dave, hang in here.